Yes, I think we can start. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our online educational event for the Right to Resist International People's Tribunal for Palestine. Today, we'll be joined by a powerful lineup of speakers who will present an introduction to the history of Palestinian people's struggle against the US-Zionist occupation and how this tribunal is part of this historic struggle and widely growing Palestine solidarity movement. Before we begin, we will first explain how to use the language interpretation. We have interpretation available for Spanish, French, Indonesian, and Urdu. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a globe icon in your Zoom menu. Please click that icon and select the language you need. If you do not see that, you may need to click the three dots titled More on your menu to find the option for interpretation. Please note that there is a technical issue with Zoom, and we had to set Urdu in Japanese channel. So if you need Urdu interpretation, please select Japanese. Our interpreters will put this into the chat in Urdu so others can read it as well. For other house rules tonight, this event is being conducted in a webinar format, which only speakers will be able to use their microphone. We will encourage you to put questions into the Q&A box that is available to you, which will be posed to the speakers during our question and answer portion at the end. And we are also live streaming the event, and we encourage you to share it on your social media and, of course, with your friends, contacts, members of your organization as well. We'll also monitor the questions that come in from the social media feed as well. This webinar will also be recorded and posted via the ILPS web platforms, including on the Right to Resist website, but no participant's name will be shown. And now let's get started. The recent ceasefire agreed upon between the Palestinian resistance and the Israeli government has filled the news headlines in every corner of the globe. Yet the mainstream Western media has celebrated this event without looking critically at how we historically got to this moment, and fails to look at the root cause of this genocide, meaning the Zionist occupation itself. It is crucially important that we understand the central role that Palestinian people and their brave resistance to oppression and genocide have played through the entire history of the process. We just passed 2 years since the beginning of the genocidal war of Israel waged against the Palestinian people, with the intent to wipe them off the land as a people. For the last 2 years, the Zionist regime has retaliated with barbarity, unprecedented in its 77 years of occupation, an act that has been nearly universally labeled as genocide and a war of extermination against all Palestine. It has indiscriminately bombed and starved a population of 2.2 million people, leading to the direct death of what is estimated to be well over 60,000 human beings, and as we all know, more than half of them was women and children. But despite the horrific onslaught being unleashed by the Zionist occupation, backed by the US to the amount of 318 billion in weapons since 1948, with 17.9 billion alone since October 7, 2023, the people of Palestine have never backed down. 2 years ago, the Palestinian people and their resistance forces bravely asserted their right to resist to the Zionist occupation through the Al-Aqsa Flood campaign. It is the history of steadfastness and resistance that we will discuss today. For it is the unbeatable resistance of the people that has brought every ceasefire into existence and made it impossible for the Zionist project to eliminate the Palestinian people. And it is this resistance that drives grassroots initiatives like the International People's Tribunal that will uphold the legacy of struggle of the Palestinian people and freedom-loving people of the world for the historical record as moral inspiration for political action. Our title of the tribunal, Right to Resist, the Palestinian People versus the Zionist Occupation and the US Government, is an international people's tribunal on the US-backed Zionist occupation's war of forced starvation and ecocide in Palestine. It is a quasi-judicial forum convened to investigate and address alleged war crimes committed by Israel and its backers, namely US, UK, France, Germany, and others. It serves as a platform for victims and advocates to and the organization to represent evidences and legal arguments related to the committed crimes against the Palestinian people. Despite its name, of course, tribunal is not merely a legal action. It is a political action. This is because its primary objective is movement building, international solidarity, and increasing the power of the people. The legal proceedings that come out of the People's Tribunal are meant to serve these objectives in all fields of people's struggle, not just the courtrooms. It is for this reason that we present this crucial educational session in the build-up to the tribunal this coming November 22 to 23 in Barcelona. If this is your first time hearing about the Right to Resist International People's Tribunal for Palestine, you can learn more and get involved at www.internationalsolidarity.org/tribunal. We will hear directly from Palestinian struggle on the key moments of the Palestinian resistance to Zionist settler colonialism throughout the decades and what led up to the historic actions of the October 7, 2023. We will also hear about the role of the US in brazenly supporting the Zionist genocidal project and why the people of the US and the wider world gain nothing from the imperialist-backed occupation and gain everything from standing in unconditionally solidarity with the Palestine. Finally, we will learn about the role of the People's Tribunal play in the historic process of national liberation and how it is aimed first and foremost at providing legal, political, and moral support to the national liberation struggles that play a decisive role in liberating their own people from the grasps of oppression. And our first speaker will be Wael El-Zerey, of the resistance throughout the entire history of Palestinian people's struggle against the US-Zionist occupation. Wael is a Palestinian activist, an environmental scientist, and a researcher, and the vice president of Palestine Land Studies Center for Development and Belonging. Wael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Oz. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I hope that my voice is clear. So today I want to take you on a journey through a century of history, a history of the Palestinian people's struggle, their deep connection to their homeland, and their enduring struggle for freedom and dignity. In fact, the Palestinian story is complex, but it's a human story. So it's also a human story. My aim is not to oversimplify, but to outline the key milestones that have shaped the struggle of the Palestinian people. So let's begin with the first key moment, which we can call it the dispossession. So in fact, the struggle of the Palestinian people did not begin in 1948, but decades earlier, where the Palestinians, as you know, that Palestine was a part of the Ottoman Empire, a land with where Muslim, Christian, and Jewish communities lived together. So after the First World War, when Britain controlled with France controlled the Middle East. So the first major turning point came in 1917 with the Balfour Declaration. The British government, which was controlling the Palestinian territory, promised a national home for Jewish people in Palestine. This was done without the permission of the Palestinian people, the majority who made up over 90% of the population. So this was a classic colonial act, one power making a promise about the land that belonged to others. As Zionist immigration increased under British control, so tension grew. The Palestinian people resisted through protests and major revolt from 1936 to 1939, which was under the name that we called later in the Palestinian history, the Great Revolution. We consider that Great Revolution as the beginning of the rise of the Palestinian nationalism. In this revolution, so all the Palestinian social classes participated in the struggle against the British imperialism and the Zionism. The workers who suffered from unemployment because of the Jewish labor-only policy, the peasants who lost their lands, and also the other Palestinian classes who tried to help through writing about what's happening in Palestine. In this period of time, so imperialist and Zionist aliens, imperialist at that time that was the British government, and Zionism worked together to crush the Arab resistance. But the revolutionary legacy is, despite the military defeat, as Hassan Kanafani, the Palestinian writer, writes in his book about this revolution, Kanafani viewed it as a revolutionary school that laid the groundwork for the future resistance, including the emerging of organized armed struggle. In his book, Hassan Kanafani, when he speaks about the Great Revolution, he insists on a very important point, that the struggle of the Palestinian people in this Great Revolution was the struggle against a colonial settler project. So Zionism was not a return to homeland, but a European movement that dispossessed Palestinian peasants to create capitalist Jewish state allied with Western imperialism. The next phase was the Nakba, the catastrophe in 1948, and perhaps most defining milestone was the year 1948, as British mandate ended, and the UN proposed a partition plan that gave the majority of the land to Jewish minority. So war broke out. For Palestinians, this period is known as Al-Nakba, the catastrophe. It was not just a military defeat, it was a mass disposition of over 7,500 Palestinians who were expelled from their homes, their towns, villages, and were destroyed. Villages were destroyed, and their land was taken. So the map of Palestine was erased. We can imagine people who became refugees overnight all over the Palestinian territory in Gaza, West Bank, Jordan, and expelled to other countries, to the West Bank, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. So since the Nakba of 1948, an equal colonial economic relationship has taken shape between the Zionist entity and the Palestinian people, where the Palestinian people do not have any control over their resources and economy. And the Zionist authorities have considered the expansion of settlements all over the Palestinian territory as necessary for the security. If we speak about this period of time, so following the Nakba, where 750,000 Palestinians were ethnically cleansed from their lands, a newly formed state was formed as a state of occupation. So the Palestinian people began the struggle for the self-determination. The rise of the Palestinian nationalism So after the Nakba, and exactly for the next 20 years, the Palestinian struggle was largely represented by the Palestinian diaspora. In 1964, the Palestinian Liberation Organization was founded and led the Palestinian struggle against the occupation. In 1967, another important event happened in the Middle East. That was the Six-Day War, where the Zionist entity captured the remaining Palestinian territories, the West Bank, including Eastern Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. So another wave of refugees was created. Now the struggle was no longer just about the right to return. It was also about ending a military occupation that continues to control the Palestinian territory. So it was the rise of both armed resistance and political organizing. The occupation of the West Bank and Gaza in 1967 was the beginning of a new phase in economic separation of the Palestinian people. So under the military rule, the Zionist entity imposed a system of economic dependence marked by the confiscation of lands, the destruction of Palestinian industry, the forced integration of Palestinian labor into Zionist economy. And in 1987, the world took notice with the start of the first Intifada, which was a massive grassroots uprising. So largely of young people with stones facing one of the world's most powerful armies. It was a powerful declaration of Palestinian dignity. So as a result of the first Intifada forced a recognition of the Palestinian could not be ignored. This led to a moment of hope, which they called the Oslo Peace Accords in 1993, but also did not stop the expansion of the Zionist settlements in the occupied West Bank. The settlements, illegal under the international law, continued to grow, carving up the land meant for a future Palestinian state. In 2000, it was the beginning of the second Intifada. So the trust was gone. The Israeli response was the reoccupation, and the Palestinian political landscape began to fracture. If we go to the situation in Gaza Strip, so Gaza Strip, where the population constitutes a demographic thorn for the occupation, has been subject to varying policies since the Nakba. One demographic consequence was the demographic consequences of the Nakba was the increase of the population of Gaza between 1947 and 1949. So between 1947 and 1949, 200,000 Palestinian refugees fled to Gaza, forming about 80% of the Palestinian residents in Gaza. So since then, the Israeli occupation tried to develop some strategies to get rid and to control the Gaza Strip. So right now, after 2007 or in 2007, the fracture of became official in 2007 when the Palestinian force Hamas won elections and took control of Gaza Strip. So the Zionist occupation imposed a strict land, air, and sea blockade on Gaza, a tiny strip of land with 2 million people. It has been described as the world's largest open-air prison. So life in Gaza has become a cycle of poverty and a cycle of poverty. in the West Bank, also the Israeli occupation continued the settlements and the control of the Palestinian land. The situation also in the south of Palestine, if we take, for example, the situation in Beersheba, the south of Palestine, where there are some Palestinian Bedouin villages, they were also under the control of the Zionist occupation. So if we try to resume the struggle of Palestinian people, we have a people who have endured dispossession since 1948, military occupation, fragmentation between the West Bank, Gaza, and between the West Bank and Gaza. Through it all, the Palestinian identity has not only survived, it has been forged in fire. The central demands remain right to self-determination and an end to the occupation and a just solution for the refugees. The story of Palestinian struggle is not over. It's a story of proud injustice, profound injustice, but also one of incredible resilience. It's a story that continues to be written every day by students, activists, farmers who are trying to return to their homeland. What's important now, after the ceasefire, is what the Palestinians need from the international solidarity. In fact, during the war in Gaza, the international solidarity played a very important role in supporting the Palestinian struggle and resistance in Gaza. So as we all followed the speech of the Donald Trump, when he said to Netanyahu that you lost the public relations. That was because of the support of the international solidarity. So the international solidarity has played a very important role in the last war. It ranges from immediate humanitarian response and political pressure to the long-term strategic work on economic pressure on the occupation. So every action, from a social media post to a conversation with a friend to a protest at a government building, contributes to building the political will necessary to end the occupation and achieve freedom, justice, and equality for the Palestinian people. Right now, the international solidarity movement has to do more work for making more political and diplomatic pressure. This is about changing the policies of governments and international bodies. Also, civil society and economic pressure. The boycott is a strategic, non-violent form of pressure. Right now, also the humanitarian and direct support. Right now, after the ceasefire, so the humanitarian situation, especially in Gaza, is catastrophic. Direct support is vital. So the direct support is vital. So thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you, Wael, for your presentation on the history of Palestinian resistance movements and what led up to October 7 and why resistance is still needed, especially after the peace plan. Many have said that today Palestine is the moral compass of the world and a beacon for all liberation movements looking for shining examples of how to wage their own struggle for freedom and just and lasting peace. The solidarity movements for Palestine has grown exponentially in recent years, and the International People's Tribunal actually is a product of this widespread solidarity and commitment to action of world's peoples to stand with the Palestinian people in their fight. We would like to play a nice video recording of a song sung by Karachi high school students for Gaza. We will show the lyrics on the screen in English, Spanish, French, and in Bahasa.
Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free. Palestine, Palestine. Palestine, Palestine. 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 Palestine, Palestine. Palestine, Palestine.
बहुत शुक्रिया सोफिया थिएटर।
Hi, Phil.
Yes. Amazing performance. Please give virtual emoji reactions and applauses for the performance. That last video was from a performance by the Solsha for Social Change, an official endorser of the International People's Tribunal. We encourage you all to sign your organizations onto Tribunal as an endorser too. You can do it by visiting the website, the internationalsolidarity.org/tribunal. And over there you will see a button. Our next speaker will speak on the role of the US in backing Zionist occupation and the role of international solidarity in supporting the Palestinian people's rights to resist. We will hear from Sarah Flanders of International Action Center and United National Anti-War Coalition, UNAC. Sarah, floor is yours.
Thank you so very much. It's really an honor to be here today, and I want to thank you, Wael and Oz and the International League of People's Struggle. It's exciting to hear the plans for the International People's Tribunal on Palestine. I want to begin today with a salute to Gaza, to resistance. As the still united Palestinian resistance movement said in their statement, resistance continues in all its forms. And it's that determination that we want to salute. The resistance accomplished what the Zionists and US imperialism said they would never allow. Netanyahu and Trump both demanded that Hamas and every group of resistance in Gaza must be disarmed, defeated, disbanded, and that all the Palestinians would be relocated, driven out of Gaza. Remember Netanyahu's boasts, his map at the UN with no Palestine. They all said they would never meet and would never negotiate with Hamas. And look at these past days. The Zionists failed. They failed on every front. Israel achieved none of its goals, and it is hated and isolated everywhere in the world. Palestine is embraced by the world, and it will be rebuilt by Palestinians. And there'll be no Trump Tower in Gaza. Now, what else failed? Israel is the greatest recipient of US aid in US history, year after year. The greatest recipient of total US aid. Between 1946 and 2024, Israel has received more than 228 billion in military aid from the US, and that's well over 300 billion adjusted for inflation. Just think what that could do. You really need to calculate. You could look at it online in so many ways. It's more than enough to cover health care for all in the US for many years. In terms of world poverty, hunger, the greatest killer in the world is still hunger. And yet $300 billion went down a rat hole of military aid to Israel. 300 billion, and the Zionist IDF super military could not defeat the most isolated, impoverished, surrounded population. Israel used 4 generations of US weapons, and they failed. Think about that. Now, US imperialism was the first country to recognize the state of Israel upon its founding in 1948. And Israel since then has received hundreds of billions in foreign aid. It's a leading buyer also of US weapons systems and on traditional arms sales. And it also has privileged access to the most advanced US military platforms and technologies. Then there's a US role in funding and backing and arming the Zionist settlers in the West Bank. So this is not only a Zionist failure, it is a stunning US failure. All those tens of billions of dollars, all those weapons to this US proxy, worthless. Now, Israel from its creation was a totally dependent creation of Western imperialism. The first, since the Balfour Declaration, was a British proxy. And then by 1948, as Wael described, a US tool. It had no independent existence. It was prosperous due to Western political and economic patronage. Because Israel provided a strategic US foothold in the region, as well as the intelligence and advanced technological partnership. Now, since October 2023, the US increased military aid to Israel has totaled another 22 billion in the last 2 years. And that's in addition to the annual, which is guaranteed to Israel, 3.8 billion. There's a standing agreement of specific allocations. So this was another allocation of 3.5 billion for foreign military funding and 4 billion for missile defense and another 1.2 billion for the Iron Beam and laser defense systems. So for the last 10 years, this is important to know, Israel had a 10-year guarantee of 3.8 billion a year. And then on top of that has come this additional 22 billion. So it's a huge, huge amount of money, of weapons, of funding, of equipment. Israel's impunity rests on a whole number of alliances, also with European states. I'm not going to go into that right now, but there's a continuing export of dual-use technology, despite the formal bans that are demanded by people's movements in so many countries. The Western ruling class are all entwined with the arms lobbies, and it's an ideological alliance to remain supportive of Israel. Now, it's not only military aid. I just want to say a word on the role of Israeli bonds. By July 2023, Israeli bonds had already generated 49 billion in worldwide investments. A lot of that is funding from US investors. These investors in Israeli bonds, they include corporations, wealthy billionaires, that's true, insurance companies, unions, banks, financial institutions, universities, all number of educational foundations, and the major nonprofits. So investments in Israeli bonds from the US includes both institutional investors and state and local municipal governments. Since October of 2023, these sales of these bonds by US investors, hedge funds, has surged. The 20 largest institutional investors, which are primarily the asset managers, they're US-based arms and international firms. Democratic and Republican officials around the country have boasted of their investments as a show of support for Israel and war. It's really shocking. Major investors have been the state treasury of Florida and New York and Texas and Pennsylvania and Ohio. There's over 90 US state and municipal pension and treasury funds that have invested more than $3 billion in Israeli bonds. And universities, both private and public, have invested billions of dollars in Israeli bonds. The total value of US university endowments, they have endowments of about $1 trillion. And a lot of that goes into Israeli bonds, corporations, companies. It's difficult to know how much, if that was a whole basis of the encampments, demanding to know what each university had invested in the Israeli war machine. And just like pension funds, the university endowments, they're treated like a giant slush fund by the managers. There's, as I say, there's 1.7 billion in additional purchases of states and municipalities. Now, what are these Israeli bonds for? They really are development funds for this fake Israeli economy, which is held up from the West. It supports the infrastructure, industrial projects during wartime, and military needs. Now, the other thing is Israel is a high-tech center in the region. How is that possible? Again, because Israel is guaranteed investment money will flow from US institutions for every conceivable project. There's no other country that has this continued level of support. So money flows into the Israeli stock market, US money, from US people's institutions here, from pension funds, from universities. not because it's some safe investment even, but it's because hedge fund managers push public funds from universities and state pension funds. They use it as their giant, as I say, slush fund. These huge incentives, the military aid, the commercial deals, the economic aid, and always the enormous military aid. So when we say that Israel is a US proxy army, they describe it themselves as their unsinkable aircraft carrier in the region. And their role from the beginning was to make war not only on the indigenous Palestinian population, but also on the surrounding Arab countries who were in a revolutionary ferment against colonial domination. Now it turns out it was a bad investment because they're unable to defeat a determined people's movement. Now, there's another thing that we're going to talk about: Israel's funding, support. The largest media conglomerations in the world all push Zionism and hostility to people's resistance. Now, media is the ultimate weapon, the most powerful. It's a war for people's hearts and minds. Not only in the US, but French and German and British media, overwhelmingly Zionist. All the imperialists use their power to shut down social media. There were tens of thousands of Facebook and YouTube, Instagram, X shut down. No debate or appeal possible. And yet, the world population and the US population is today totally against Zionism. How is this possible? There have been thousands of arrests, expulsions, deportations, not only in the US, but throughout Europe. It's all failed. This is important in evaluating what's going on and in evaluating the limits of US imperialist power. It's being exposed. Not so powerful. The most vicious repression revealed their weakness rather than their strength, because they couldn't defeat this global solidarity with the besieged. It broke through everywhere. Overwhelmingly today, the world stands with Gaza, whether it is the flotillas, the strikes, the shutdowns. There have been resistance on every front. There is really today a revival of internationalism, and we should not underestimate our power. When we think of the work of the dock workers refusing arms shipments, and really a political strike in Italy, that's different than a strike on bread and butter issues, on austerity demands. It was a strike, it was a general strike, a shutdown for Palestine. That's internationalism at its very root. It's been decades since such a thing happened. We can consider the health workers denouncing hospital bombings and the artists boycotting cultural exchanges. It shows how solidarity can really take material form. The internationalism of youth and workers' movements, it's an anti-colonial memory, you could say, that is being revived, coming back. Now, the task of a tribunal is to gather the harrowing crimes and record them, and to make sure that the hatred of Zionism and US imperialism is informed and is part of movements going forward. It's a big task. Now, it's part of transforming Gaza's isolation into a shared global responsibility. Palestinian right to live, to return, to resist dehumanization, the right to exist in dignity. I'll close by saying that imperialism today operates less through colonies and more through walls, blockades, sanctions, debt traps, covert regime change operations. And against the mounting attack of this apparatus of fragmentation, internationalism provides the only coherent alternative. So supporting the people's right to resist has always been the task and the obligation of the global movement of all forces seeking liberation. thank you for your efforts and for being here with you today.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for your eye-opening presentation on the role of US in backing Zionist occupation with data and the role of international solidarity in supporting the Palestinian people's right to resist. Like you said, we are witnessing revival of internationalism because of the Palestinian struggle. Before we move on, we would like to thank the endorsers of the International People's Tribunal. As of today, we have 54 official endorsing organizations, and the list is growing almost daily. Again, you can endorse the tribunal by visiting internationalsolidarity.org/tribunal-endorse. You can express your organization's endorsement by sending members to attend the tribunal in November physically, by announcing your support publicly and encouraging other organizations to endorse, donating to support the work, and much more. If you endorse, you will also get your name shown in the website. We want to thank you all and thank you our endorsers that you can see on our website. We will now watch a few video messages from some of our endorsers about why they choose to endorse the International People's Tribunal for Palestine.
I'm here, Marine Corps veteran and member of Veterans for Peace, coming to you from the Global Samud Flotilla on board the Owaila. We're about 240 nautical miles out from Gaza. I'm sending this video in show of support for the International People's Tribunal in Barcelona. It's a very important and crucial step in laying the groundwork for holding accountability to Israeli and United States war crimes, to set the precedent for accountability to come. And so I would encourage those that can to endorse and to look into and to follow the International People's Tribunal for more. Thank you. Free Palestine, and let's end the siege on Gaza now.
Hello. I am endorsing the International People's Tribunal as co-founder of Indian Dancers for Gaza's Children, or IDGC, an artist-led global citizens collective that organizes demonstrations, solidarity events, and cultural evenings to raise awareness about and raise funds for children in Gaza who have been wounded and injured, along with their families. Today, we are endorsing the International People's Tribunal because we believe in the power of the people, the power of ordinary citizens around the world. We have seen governments around the world failing us miserably in their inability to stop the ongoing genocide, to stop Israel and to hold it accountable for its numerous violations of international law and the grave atrocities that it is committing against the Palestinian people. As we see them failing to stop this, naturally we are putting our faith in the ordinary citizens of the world, and the International People's Tribunal comprises of these ordinary citizens. As Indian Dancers for Gaza's Children, we are also putting our faith in IPT today in the hope that IPT will be one of those platforms seeking international justice for the many war crimes and atrocities committed against the children in Gaza specifically. Because IPT is an international people's tribunal, and we know that millions of people around the world have done extraordinary things to try to stop this genocide, that is one of the other reasons why we're putting our faith in them and not our governments. And this is why we're endorsing the International People's Tribunal as well. We believe all other organizations should endorse IPT for precisely the same reasons that we have.
I'm Danilo Ramos, chairperson of Kilusang Magbubukid ng Pilipinas, or Peasant Movement of the Philippines. We support the International People's Tribunal for Palestine. Will be happen this November 2025. Our call is to end the genocide, stop the imperialist war and aggression. Long live international solidarity. We believe a people united will never be defeated.
I represent Nakbayan UK. October is Peasant Month in the Philippines. Peasants, farmers, and anyone whose values align against Western imperialism, the thieving of land from the original and rightful stewards to accumulate wealth at the expense of poor people, are also fighting against the genocide of Palestinians. The IPT addresses ecocide and forced starvation as tools of genocide. So everyone should and must endorse the International People's Tribunal.
Hi, I'm Eliza. I'm from
Yes, wonderful. We have a lot of videos. Thank you to all our endorsers, and please consider endorsing your organization today as well. As Union of Cypriots, we are among the endorsers of the International People's Tribunal because Cyprus is not only a neighboring country to Palestine, but the destiny of Cypriot people who themselves are victim of the occupation and settler colonization is closely linked with the Palestinian people. The continued foreign presence resulting from the Turkish occupation of Cyprus also guarantees the existence of British military bases on the island, which facilitate the genocide taking place in Palestine. We know that the liberation struggles, whether in Cyprus, Palestine, Philippines, Puerto Rico, are interconnected. People's struggles are interconnected. So, right now, our final speaker will speak on the political nature of a people's tribunal and the role it plays in supporting grassroots movement building and solidarity with national liberation struggles. We will now hear from Suzanne Atlee. Suzanne is the president of the National Lawyers Guild, the oldest and largest progressive bar association in the US, and a member of the Bureau of the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, a global organization of progressive bars associations in over 50 countries and regions with consultative status in the United Nations. She is a long-time grassroots organizer and global worker rights advocate. She is on the steering committee of the US-Palestinian Community Network and a co-convener of the Labor for Palestine National Network in the US. Yes, Suzanne, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Oz. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna try to be brief. I just wanted to talk as meaningfully as I can about people's tribunals and my understanding of the role that they play in our political struggles and my own experience participating in organizing tribunals as well as acting as a juror in several international tribunals. So people's tribunals are fundamentally understood as, or often described as, non-governmental, civil society-based, grassroots-based, and overall people's-driven mechanism for justice used by movements when formal legal mechanisms fail or completely refuse to hold forces of oppression accountable. In most cases, formal international and local legal mechanisms are incapable of enacting justice, even when they do hear these issues, because these forums are often corrupted by the control of the agendas of the ruling class, of the imperialist core and their compradors. People's tribunals are political and moral platforms, as well as legal platforms, even though they're not formally understood to be so. They function independently of imperialist power structures, and we utilize these models to seek justice while simultaneously continuing to intervene in formal legal mechanisms to demand justice until we can build formal alternatives for justice. People's tribunals can be very sort of significant in supporting the aims of the liberation struggles that we're a part of. These platforms seek to hold states, corporations, and systems of oppression accountable. Very often, when speaking about people's tribunals, the word non-binding is used to sort of describe its an independent nature. But I think sometimes when people describe people's tribunals as non-binding, that it sort of does the whole model an injustice, right? It's not exactly a helpful description because evidence presented in these tribunals can be and have been referenced in formal proceedings like UN mechanisms and international courts that can then lead to binding verdicts or can help to drive a change in public policy in local and state governments or a change in UN resolutions, etc. And people use the term non-binding to refer to people's tribunals because they're comparing them to formal courts, which are understood as binding. But why is it helpful that formal courts are binding when their rulings are ultimately often discriminatory or very narrow in that they're only looking at certain aspects of injustice through a very narrow lens of rights, sort of rights frameworks. And when these formal courts often, act to control evidence and testimonies of the oppressed, and what does it matter that these courts are binding in the first place? And especially when these courts, these so-called binding courts, refuse to hear the call for justice at all, like in the case, for example, of the injustices that have been bestowed on the Palestinian people for decades. Tribunals help to build public awareness to systematically silence struggles and build public understanding of these struggles and public investment in seeking justice. They offer a narrative of people's struggles that counter imperialist and racist narratives that are upheld through very wide systems of counterinsurgency. They empower victims. They provide a vital forum for survivors, for families of survivors, for affected communities to present their experiences at times when no other forums are willing to hear these testimonies, to hear these stories. They help to build solidarity. They act as a platform to connect movements to the wider world, to share information, to share strategies, to connect between national liberation movements and the mandates of the tribunals that are put together. They provide moral and political clarity. They operate outside of official government and in international institutions. They can present they can present things through an independent framework, right? And they can present things and they are able to sort of bring in questions of justice and answers to the question of what is justice, that formal courts sort of don't allow because they're so limiting. Tribunals help to create a historical record. The evidence and testimony collected create a record of offenses that can be used to in the future to hold perpetrators accountable, even if the tribunal itself cannot enforce its judgments. It can be used in other forums. But it creates a historical record that is sort of important for the longevity of struggles and the support that we need to offer struggles as well. And it also supports political action. Very often, the findings of people's tribunals have led to broader political activism, whether that be protests or demonstrations or political education campaigns or changes in policy, as I mentioned before. The first historically recorded People's Tribunal was that of the Russell Tribunal in 1966 and 1967, which was made up of around 18 countries and heard testimony from over 30 witnesses on war crimes in the Vietnam War. And in its mission, it stated, "Our purpose is to establish without fear or favor the full truth about this war and contribute to the world's justice, to the reestablishment of peace and the liberation of oppressed peoples." Now, after that sort of historic Russell Tribunal of 66 and 67, we would actually see many, many examples of this model of people's tribunals taking place internationally, but also locally around the world. Right after this initial Russell Tribunal on Vietnam, we saw a local tribunal take place in Detroit in 1967 in response to the Detroit Rebellion and the police violence that led to the deaths of many members of the Black community in Detroit. And then subsequently, we would see similar tribunals happening on an international scale, looking at the role of racialized repression in the United States, whether that be in the form of political prisoners or police assassinations. And I can share some links to some of these really sort of significant tribunals in the chat for you after I'm done speaking. But these tribunals were significant for many reasons, including that they were used. There was a 1979 commission following up on the petition to the UN on political prisoners and racialized repression in the US. There was a 1990 Special International Tribunal on the violation of human rights of political prisoners and prisoners of war in the US. And both these tribunals contributed to the narrative of racialized repression in the US and were eventually used in high level international forums that were working to hold the United States accountable for this violence. And that was followed again in January and April of 2021, where the International Commission of Inquiry on Systematic Racist Police Violence Against People of African Descent in the US was held. And that report also was used in the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights, who again was reporting on the human rights record of the United States. Now, this commission that was held in 2021 was one that I was able to sort of view and in its entirety. And I have to say that it was very powerful in the way that it was able to give a forum to families who had lost loved ones to racist police violence in the United States, which is still very much an epidemic. and still sort of very much not an issue that has been able to sort of meet with justice for the families, and for the victims, and for the communities who they impact. And without a commission like this, the experiences of the families and the communities in which these killings have taken place may not or could not have been heard. Similarly, I have been monitoring for many years. I've been following many of the tribunals that have been set up as part of the International People's Tribunal on the Philippines that my colleagues have been a part of. And in recent years, I've been part of two such tribunals as a juror, also looking at systems of oppression in the Philippines, the liberation struggle in the Philippines, and state oppression against the liberation struggle. And particularly the tribunal in which I was part of in Brussels of last year, for me was incredibly eye-opening. And it wasn't eye-opening just in the fact that there was a tremendous amount of evidence that was presented of crimes against humanity that were taking place at the hands of the Filipino army in conjunction with the US Army, that there was a whole system. It really helped to sort of illuminate, by looking at sort of the evidence in its entirety, by hearing the stories, by hearing the testimonies, by hearing the narratives, by reading the reports of previous tribunals, and then coming together in Brussels, it really sort of helped to create a great deal of political clarity for me, in terms of what the struggle in the Philippines really is about, and the very sort of systematic way in which a counterinsurgency war is sort of being used to crush that movement. And that kind of clarity, the political and moral clarity that came as a result of being part of this tribunal, would never really have happened in any other sort of like formal proceeding. That doesn't mean that we don't want to be able to bring these issues to formal proceedings, both international and local. We still need to fight in these forums. But these people's tribunals are sort of very powerful, in helping us to build the kind of political clarity that we need, to take these fights for justice as far as they need to go. I was also recently in part of a local tribunal in the United States, that was the first tribunal really that was held to hear about the grievances or the struggles of agricultural workers in North America and the US and Canada. And it struck me that, even if a farm worker in the United States or Canada is given a forum to talk about wage theft, or to talk about health and safety on the job, or to talk about what it's like to work under abusive bosses, it still would never match what we were able to sort of achieve in a public binational forum, where we were able to hear the entirety of the story of these farm workers, right? Which didn't begin when they took a job on a farm in the United States or on a farm in Canada. It began when imperialist wars came to their country and displaced them from their lands, and forced them to have to migrate and be part of an exploitative food chain, in which they had sort of no alternatives but to be exploited or deported. And again, having that sort of really helps us and helps the public who hear these testimonies, who read the reports, to sort of understand sort of the entire narrative, right? And gain sort of clarity as to what are the different systems of oppression, capitalist, imperialist systems of oppression that are driving this exploitation, as opposed to just, going to a local labor court and hearing sort of a very sort of like narrow version of what was taking place in the life of the worker on that particular day. We have to have the clarity around the larger picture, the systematic systems of oppression that have led to whatever labor incident happened in order for us to be able to sort of address those systems of oppression through struggle, through calls for justice, in political education, etc. I also just wanted to mention before I close that I was also for a couple of years part of organizing something called the International People's Tribunal on U.S. Imperialism, which looked at the use of economic coercive measures such as sanctions and blockades as a tool of imperialist domination. And in that tribunal, we held 16 hearings of the use of these measures against countries like Iraq, Syria, Venezuela, Cuba, Haiti, Libya, and Gaza. And two of our expert witnesses from Gaza were murdered by the Zionists in the last 2 years. Now, that also was a very significant experience for me and for others in that, we were able to use the tribunal to frame the question of what are economic and coercive measures, to frame it around the question of imperialism and not just the question of rights and human rights. And we our findings actually were eventually used by UN High Commissioner on Sanctions. And we're continuing to use the findings of this particular tribunal for political education, as well as to work alongside the many movements that were part of this around the world to continue to stop the use of these blockades and sanctions from everywhere, from Venezuela to the African continent, etc. Now, I just want to end by saying that it's really important that we continue to use this model for political education and to push policy change, to ignite calls for justice, to build solidarity with liberation struggles. But we also need to use the outcomes of these models to continue to intervene in the formal courts. We can't abandon those forums completely to the imperialist and capitalist agendas. We have to continue to be in those spaces, to carry the voices that come out of these tribunals, to carry the voices of liberation struggles, and to demand that these forums act in a way that protects justice and protects people. And we have to continue to do that until we can build the systems of justice that we want, that we want, and that our struggles need and deserve. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very, very much, Suzanne, for your informative presentation, and especially for highlighting the role of the tribunal play in solidarity with national liberation struggles. And thank you for the other examples you shared about the other tribunals. And actually, thank you to all of our speakers today. We hear today about the history of Palestinian resistance movements, what led up to October 7, and why the resistance remains necessary. We hear about the role of the United States in backing Zionist occupation and the importance of the international solidarity in supporting Palestinian people's right to resist. And we also hear about the vital role of the tribunal. Before moving into Q&A portion, we would like to play another round of videos featuring our organizational endorsers of the tribunal.
I'm Eliza. I'm from NAILS. It stands for the National and Anti-Imperialist Liberation Solidarity. We are an anti-imperialist organization dedicated to supporting movements for independence and national liberation across the globe, fostering solidarity among those who resist oppression and strive for national liberation and freedom of colonies and semi-colonies from imperialism and local tyranny. We are endorsing the International People's Tribunal for Palestine to seek justice on behalf of the Palestinian people. Millions of civilians, including hundreds of thousands of children, have been displaced, maimed, or killed by Israeli bombardment supported by American imperialist interests. A ceasefire deal may have been reached, but it is anything but firm and will not provide any kind of justice to surviving people of Palestine. The manufactured scarcity of resources in the Gaza Strip and the continued organized displacement and harassment of Palestinians in the West Bank shows that this situation is far from over. Despite 2 years of violent and extreme genocide broadcasted to nearly everyone in the world, the ICC and the ICJ did nothing but issue statements calling the situation a possible genocide and an arrest warrant for some of the Israeli leaders. No war crimes that have been spread across social media platforms by the war criminals themselves in the IDF are being prosecuted. The ICC and the ICJ do not represent the people across the world calling for justice, but imperialist interests, and thus no justice for the people can be found with them. This People's Tribunal, International People's Tribunal, is made up from and supported by organizations that represent people across the world struggling for a better world. It is a pathway forward for the Palestinian people to expose the war crimes committed against them and hold accountable the war criminals, leaders, and imperialist interests directly responsible. We encourage other organizations that represent the people to endorse this tribunal and stand for justice and accountability to end the genocide of the Palestinian people and support seeking justice for oppressed people around the world, such as in Australia, where the First Peoples are still witnessing the destruction of their land and community and are continually denied their right to self-determination.
I'm Ulla Krötzer for Women for Peace in Finland, also active in Global Women for Peace United Against NATO, GUAN. I'm here outside the Finnish Parliament today protesting against the war in Gaza, and I strongly recommend you to support the initiative for the International People's Tribunal on Gaza. It's very important that we create a strong push on all the governments in the world, especially the Western governments, to now see to the ceasefire in Gaza and also to support a free Gaza and of course stop all the trade with Israel as a punishment and take Israel to court for the genocide. So please stay strong, join hands, take part in the International People's Tribunal. And here is another person who also wants to support the tribunal.
Hello, I'm Vanessa Ryan, also from Finland. I think it's extremely important to uphold international law and ensure that perpetrators of war crimes and genocide, regardless of where they are from and which country they come from, are held responsible and brought to court. Thank you. Please support.
Peace for Life is proud to announce its strong endorsement of 2025 International People's Tribunal for Palestine, as initiated by the International League of People's Struggle and the International Association of Democratic Lawyers. As an international people's forum consisting of various faith-based organizations for global peace and justice, Peace for Life believes prosecuting Israel and the United States for its crimes of land grabbing, of genocide, and multiple violation of international humanitarian law is not only just and proper, but a moral imperative of our time. Considering the blatant disregard of Israel and the United States of the basic rights and dignity of the Palestinian people since 1948, this International People's Tribunal is a monumental step towards achieving justice for the Palestinian people and accountability for crimes committed against them by the Zionist Israel in complicity with the imperialist United States. We therefore enjoin other organizations and peoples of the world to endorse this International People's Tribunal for Palestine to be held in Barcelona, Spain this coming November. Long live the freedom and liberation of the Palestinian people.
It is amazing to see all the endorsers from all around the world. Thank you again for all of them. And again, we encourage everyone to endorse to the tribunal by visiting internationalsolidarity.org/tribunal. We will now go into our question and answer portion. You can type your questions into the Q&A box and we will pose them to the speakers. You can either direct your questions to all speakers in general, or you can name a specific speaker that you would like to hear from. We have right now a few questions from social media and also Q&A box. I will start reading them. The first one from our Q&A box from Sarah Al-Hamsi. Other than donating to the people of Palestine and other organizations that support this cause, what else can we do to mobilize for Palestine? Love and solidarity from Manila, Philippines. I guess this is a question for all of our speakers. And who would like to start? Yes. Sarah?
Well, I don't know if I should be the one to start this discussion, but the donations can be important, so I don't want to say not. But really, what is most important, in my opinion, is the visible support, the demonstrations, the encampments, the blockades, the people's actions, the strikes, the actions that became everywhere, and that became a threat to all different governments that were complicit totally in this war on Palestine. To sometimes it was just to make phony statements. For example, here was a flotilla, the Samud flotilla, 50 boats, and representatives of unions and people's movements on them. And based on the huge pressure in Italy and Spain, they grandly announced they were going to send a couple of their Navy boats. But it was just public relations. It wasn't really to protect the flotilla. It was to encourage it to turn back and then to pick up the pieces, to stand by while all of these hundreds of people were arrested and the material aid confiscated. But it was enormously important because take even the strike, general strike that took place in Italy. The Genoa port workers said, we have one person on one boat, and if they're stopped, we will all go out on strike. That was a political strike, such as we haven't seen before. So that presented a real challenge. And the fact that that was happening now in Germany, it's not legal to be for Palestine. And yet that law became just a shambles when people came out again and again and again. In France, you can't put a Palestinian flag on any public building. Nevertheless, that happened again and again. Or you look at the laws in Britain against Palestine Aid, declaring it a terrorist organization, and thousands of people challenged that, went to jail. I know in the US, the actions, the encampments, the constant actions, just the actions during UN week, where people were out there every single day, because Netanyahu could speak. He had a platform, but the entire Palestinian delegation was blocked. So these actions really are a challenge, and they also gave life to the encouragement in a deep way to those fighting such unbearable conditions in Gaza, knowing that they weren't fighting alone, that there was real pressure and support and solidarity behind them. So I would say everything that can be done, particularly every public action, is very important in this day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. While Susan, would you like to also comment on the? Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah, well, please.
Okay. In fact, right now, even if we are speaking about ceasefire, but what we have to be sure about that is not the end of the war, because Palestine is always under occupation. So we have to be well prepared, and we have to work hard to isolate the occupation state of occupation. So there is a lot of work to do. The work about not only about donation, but also a work of awareness, a work of even the work of boycott and more pressure on governments, and also the companies that are supporting the Israeli occupation. Thank you.
Thank you, Wael. Susan, would you like to?
Yeah, what I will reiterate is sort of the importance of making sure that the movement continues and make sure that folks know, what the true narrative of this ceasefire is, right? Because we can't afford for there to be a lull in our cries for justice for Gaza and for Palestine. And we have to ensure that folks know that the genocide continues, and that imperialism continues, and imperialism is what was one of the main obstacles to being able to stop this genocide in the past 2 years, because many states that could have acted didn't act as they could and should have, not just because of Zionism, but because they're too linked to US imperialism. So we have to continue to support Gaza through donations. We have to continue to talk about the legitimacy of Palestinian resistance and the right to resist under international law, as this tribunal has been is setting out to do. We have to continue to call for all complicit Western governments to be held accountable, and for Israel to be held accountable. We have to continue to strike. We have to continue to boycott, to help isolate the Zionist entity, both economically, politically, and socially and culturally. And we have to also ensure, and speaking from someone who lives in the imperialist core, we need to work to delink our own economies from the imperialist economy. All of this is what has been driving sort of the Zionist project in Palestine and in the region. We need to continue to offer political education around these connections. And also, I think it's a good moment to remind ourselves that we also need to be paying attention to the West Bank, where the occupation and the slow genocide continues, and particularly to pay attention to the plight of Palestinian political prisoners, where the number of political prisoners right now is around 11,000. There are many that were also detained from Gaza who are missing, and in the conditions that we're hearing about in these prisons are I think might be like one of the worst examples of incarceration that I've ever heard. As somebody who, is engaged in legal advocacy. So, I think, it's a huge, all of this is a huge task. But I think with forums like this, we're able to touch on all of it.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Right now, I'm checking the questions on social media, and we have few questions. One of them is, let me see, what role does a people's tribunal play in solidarity movement building for Palestine? And any of our speakers could answer. So it is about the, again, what role does People's Tribunal play in solidarity movement building for Palestine?
I mean, I can start. I think that the same role I think it play in building solidarity with any liberation struggle, which is to offer a platform to understand to understand the narrative of the Palestinian national liberation movement, to understand what Zionist entity is and the crimes that if it's committed in the crimes of imperialism, to be able to point us kind of in the direction of what does what would justice look like for Palestine, right? And how do we achieve it? I think the tribunals as a whole, whether it's about Palestine or about the Philippines, are one of the strongest examples that I've seen of being able to build solidarity with liberation struggles, right? When you bring these platforms, to a city like Washington, D.C., or to Brussels, or to Barcelona, or to Venezuela, we these are opportunities for us to hear, directly from the grassroots, from those that are at the front lines of struggle, that we wouldn't hear in mainstream media, that we wouldn't be able to hear in the United Nations, and so I think that like it's an incredibly powerful way to sort of build understanding, to build political clarity, as I said, about like what exactly is taking place. And that helps to sort of build, consistent, I think, like consistent solidarity.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Are there, Sarah, Weil, would you like to also comment on this? If not, we could go to the
Okay, I'll comment.
Yes.
I think one important role that a tribunal can play, and I was deeply involved in a tribunal after the Iraq War, where we held hearings in, I think, 19 countries, and then there was a final tribunal that thousands attended. And we published it in a book and a video, and really tried to gather all of the evidence, the material, both in the local hearings and in the final tribunal. Where an injustice is so great and the whole world is appalled, and the impunity or the arrogance is so overwhelming, it does give real vent, voice to people, to have a tribunal that says yes, that has some standing, by its judges, the people who are named as prosecutors, and to hear the evidence, to say, yes, this is a real violation of international law, of human rights law, and that cites it. The public testimony, the public record becomes really a cathartic exercise, you could say, in many ways. I mean, it means a lot to the people who participate, who hear it, who give testimony for it. I was actually surprised because, of course, we don't have weight. So going through a tribunal that says, yes, this is a violation. We did a international tribunal on US NATO crimes in Yugoslavia, where you have testimony. Okay, they hit 4 tanks and they destroyed 400 schools, and here's a list of every school that was bombed, every hospital that was bombed. That was important to the people listening. And also testimony from those who'd been under the bombs or under the ruin or had family members who were lost. So I think a tribunal is an important vehicle, and I would especially encourage you to publish afterwards the testimony. Making it a public record means that others will use it, will refer to it, and will feel that that the world did in fact listen. So I both it's both important that you're doing it, and also think of the next steps afterwards, how you bring that tribunal's findings back to people around the world, and how you publish it.
Thank you, Sarah. And Wael, would you like to comment on the question?
In fact, I share the same ideas with Sarah and Suzanne. Simply, criminals must pay for their crimes. That's it. So we have to work on that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have another question. It says, my question is related to religion propaganda used by Israel and how speakers see that. And also religion propaganda in supporting Palestinian struggle and how the solidarity came from Islam. There's a question like that. Who would like to start?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Of course. The first part of the question is it says that the religion propaganda used by Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And also the second part says that how some solidarity came from Islam to the Palestinian struggle. So this is two questions at the same time.
In fact, if we can comment on the question. The religion, what we have to make it clear to everyone supporting the Palestinian people's struggle is that the Palestinian struggle is against occupation. We look to the state of occupation as a part of the imperialist project. So it's not about religion. This is what Netanyahu tried to use during his speeches to the world. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, Sarah, Suzanne, would you like to comment?
Sarah, do you want to go ahead?
Okay. From the very beginning, Zionism has used religion as a way to justify its existence and its crimes, and its existence as a proxy or a protectorate or a front line for British and then US imperialism. It was always justified based on both the Holocaust against Jewish people in Europe. But that became a reason and an excuse for its crimes against the Arab population. There have been a very important role for anti-Zionist Jewish people to play in speaking out against this and saying, no, it has nothing to do with Judaism. It has everything to do with imperialism and colonialism and settler state, and we reject it. And in the last 2 years, we've seen an important role played by anti-Zionist Jewish activists who've moved far, originally from being against some of the crimes of Zionism to actually becoming anti-Zionist. That was a progression of a whole part of particularly Jewish youth in the US who rejected everything that had been inculcated in them by their parents, by their family, by their culture. It was a big step forward. Now, Zionism was also encouraged and built in the US by Christian fundamentalists, what they call Christian Zionists. There are more Christian Zionists than there are Jewish Zionists in the US. They're very well funded, big mega churches. And it was part of the US sort of intentionally gathering another support layer for Israel. So religion does play a role in this, and it's important for particularly Jewish voices speaking out, and also for the Christian Zionists rejecting that and looking at the way in which they are also being used. Now, it was well understood that part of the whole war on Palestine is also intentionally, in the way it is cast, against Islam. And that also needs to be recognized. And we've seen it in the US as such a weapon, particularly since 9/11 and the war, Afghanistan, Iraq. We could go on, where the Muslim population in the US has been criminalized and demonized in the media in really racist ways. Now, the response around the world is to be all the more for Palestine, for what it stands for, and for the right of resistance. I mean, I'm just giving you my opinion on this, but and the role of Hamas and Islamic Jihad, they played an important role in building resistance, and it was done as an Islamic force, but also in real block and ties with secular resistance forces among the Palestinian population. So there is both religion can play an important and progressive role, and it can also be used by the ruling class in very reactionary ways to whip people up into a really a reactionary fighting force. So I think we got to see our way through it and understand its contradictions and complications.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Suzanne, would you like to comment about the question?
Yeah, I think what I would like to add is that I want to reemphasize what Sarah already mentioned about the role of Islamophobia, right? I think that is something that has been wielded by Zionism and imperialism, like other forms of racism and white supremacy, to justify colonialism, to justify subjugation. But I think that, this is also a discussion that has to happen with the broader left, global left, right? Because I think that, I have seen hesitancy on the part of many who do support the Palestinian people to stop at actually saying that they support the resistance, whether that resistance is left or Hamas or Islamic Jihad or Hezbollah, right? And I think it is learned Islamophobia that like prevents people or like acts as a block or a challenge to people understanding that these movements are legitimate and also have the right to resist legally, politically, and morally, right? And for people to think about like, would you have made a statement saying that like Hamas is a legitimate liberation struggle, that Hamas is a legitimate body of resistance that is part of the Palestinian struggle that we should be supporting like any other body of resistance from Palestine. Would you have an easier time saying that if it wasn't a religious, if it wasn't a religious organization? I think that the truth is that the people on the left throughout the world have to ask themselves that question, right? Because resistance looks different in different places in the world. I mean, like, it could be liberation theology in Latin America that's saying that, like, we need to have armed struggle against imperialism, or it is sort of driven by the beliefs of the people of Gaza who that happen to be, a very religious society. I think that the left also needs to sort of like think about the how imperialism has used these kind of racist tropes and think for themselves of whether or not that they have themselves have been influenced by that.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Uh, our Q&A time is coming to an end. Maybe the last one or maybe one more. There's a question for Wael. The question says, what is the role of the resistance in the first phase of ceasefire?
The role of the resistance?
Yes.
Well, the resistance, we have the armed resistance. We have also the political resistance, because right now, even if we are speaking about ceasefire, but there is a lot of work on the ground. You know that during the war in Gaza, the horrible war in Gaza, the Zionist entity used a huge quantity of bombs, and right now on the ground, even we know that even after the ceasefire, we will have a lot of victims because of the bombs and the arms that the occupation left on the ground. Yesterday, I was following a statement of the Palestinian civil defense on the ground, where they found some bombs which make like baby toys and other things. So there is a lot of work to do, a lot of work to eliminate what the occupation left on the ground. And as you know, according to the steps of the ceasefire, the first step, according to the deal was to deliver the Israeli soldiers to the other parties. So right now, they are trying, during this 2 years war, some of the hostages are under the destroyed buildings. They need to find them also. So there is a lot of work inside and outside.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, yes, there are more questions I have to tell in our social media and the Q&A box, but our time is limited. But we are going to have other webinars as well. I mean, this is just a start for building up events for the tribunal. We are going to have several webinars and events, and of course, the point is to going to Barcelona in November to get a legal point of view about the what is happening. I would like to thank to our speakers, And right now, I think we can slowly wrap up. We are already at 2 hours right now. We hope that it is clear from the presentation today why we need efforts like this tribunal to continue to hold the Zionists and the US and other imperialist perpetrators of the genocide accountable for their historic crimes against people. But hope it is also clear that this tribunal is not an end itself, nor will be the decisive factor in the liberation of Palestine. It is the Palestinian people themselves who will liberate their land, and the ending of the Zionist occupation will be an overall blow to the US-led war machine in a way that will serve the interests of all people fighting for liberation in their own homelands. This tribunal will be a forum where the voices of the people themselves will testify to their bravery and steadfastness against the crimes of ecocide, forced starvation, destruction of cultural heritage also, and other acts of genocide. Again, we encourage everyone to visit the website where all of our informations and updates are kept. It is internationalsolidarity.org/tribunal. You can also sign up for the Right to Resist email list to get regular updates on the preparations for the tribunal and other lead-up activities such as this one. You can also register to attend the tribunal in Barcelona on the website as well. We will also be publishing updates and resources via social media. Please subscribe to the International People's Front to see all these updates. The Instagram handle for the International People's Front is International People's Front, at International People's Front, basically. Join the growing list of endorsers of the tribunal. Endorse at our website. If you already endorsed, please encourage other organizations with work to endorse. Spread the word and tell them why you endorsed and why they should too. If you have already not done, please consider sending us a video message expressing your endorsement, as we saw on the previous sections. You can send 1-2 minute videos to outreach@internationalsolidarity.org. Also, donate to support the work of the IPT, International People's Tribunal. If you wish to donate, you can find details on the donation page. We are still working on mechanisms for submitting online donations, but you can email to us info@international.org to talk about making donation. If you are a member of a press, please consider covering the tribunal and publishing articles written by our organizers and endorsers. We also have media spokespeople who are available for interview upon requests. Our press releases can be found on the website. We will publish them on the social media as well. We'll have more educational sessions like this one leading up to the tribunal. Our next session will be held on the October 26th and will focus on the crime and impacts of ecocide, its legal definition, and the fight against the willful destruction of the environment as an act of war. You can register for it and future events on our website. There will be also announcement via emailing list. So be sure that you are signed up for the email list so you are updated from the developments and news. Finally, we'll be using the results of this tribunal to hold governments and international institutions accountable for their support the US-Zionist genocide of the Palestinian people. There will be much work to do, present the verdict be passed to the world and for the advocate for the systemic change at every level of the governance. It will also help with popular education initiatives to increase the power of mass movements and peoples to assert Palestinians' right to resist. Even if you do not physically attend the tribunal this November in Barcelona, you can use the verdict to advocate and organize wherever you live in the world. We again encourage you to subscribe to the Right to Resist email so you can be informed how you can do this and use these resources provided after the tribunal. And this is the end of our first webinar. Thank you very much for being here with us. Please stay in touch. And as we finish, and as we always say, long live international solidarity. Thank you very much and see you soon.